So let's start with that. I mean, your research and how you find out about people's experience of dealing with technology.
Yes, I suppose when you think about research, I would have talked to people, interviewed them, and then gone back and listened to what they said, and then maybe interview them again and ask them about ideas that come from them. That's called grounded research, that the theories or ideas are grounded in the conversations you have with people.
And so one of the things I'm intrigued with myself is the idea of what is education for. What you're saying here is something much more, perhaps much more social conscious than
yeah, and I'll come to your question if you don't mind. I just want to introduce another idea from that grounded research, which is
minutes left earlier. But
but the notion of learning identity. So you'll see that that's going to connect now with my answer on education. I chose people who were doing short courses in digital technology, and I spoke to them, and many of them said, look, I've been putting this off for years, and now I'm just doing the course, etc. And so I always had them just on the cusp, and I was interested in when you put it off, etc. Any names I use, by the way, are pseudonyms at the moment because it's the way we work in research and things like that. But I remember I would say to Tom, let's say, and Tom was a bus driver, and I'd say, Tom, why are you taking this course now? And Tom would answer, well, I was no good in school, and he'd go on with his explanation, and then I'd go to Mary, who was a retail worker. And I'd say, why are you taking this course? And she'd say, yeah, well, I had a lot of difficulty in school. And I was, listening back on all of this. And I was saying, I never asked them about school. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the question I asked. I asked them about why are they taking a course on technology. But of course, once I used the word course or learning, what did it do? It's just like they put on the jersey, That's their identity. And it was their learning identity, and that was framed in school, and often it was, not a happy experience. Mm-hmm. And that identity could remain fixed for many, many years, and then gets reawoken in the challenge, in the learning journey to learn new digital skills. So it was an important finding and an important piece of insight that when a person came to do the skills associated with using technology, a functional kind of set of skills, we might say, we also had to deal with their school. We also had to deal with their learning identity and to talk about that. And again, that's important insight and maybe something that people might overlook in many of the practices. But your question also was, what's my sense of what education is about? And people today have said, this sense of lifelong learning. And I've also said participation, the need to participate. And at its core, if you ask the question, why do we want to learn? What are we doing? What's going on? What's driving it? And I feel that as we live in societies that are more and more complex, that we engage in lots of activity, and we would call our society a way of doing things. You could say that that's a society or even a culture is just a collective way of going about, of performing activities. And people have needed to develop, their cognitive function. They've needed language skills. They've needed social skills, communication skills, organising, problem solving, analytical thinking, abstract thinking. All of these because we have to do stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we're driven to participate. And that's the reason why lifelong learning makes sense. And in terms of desire, I think we don't use it enough in connected with learning. Mm-hmm. I actually say with learning desire. It's a real want we have. And I found that that might come in two forms. One is specific, where you can actually identify what I want to do. Something I just want to do better. I want to send emails. That's a specific learning desire. Or general. I want to be great with computers. Now notice if you analyse the language, the general learning desire is often stated by people in terms of being someone else. I want to be a computer wizzo. And a specific desire is stated in terms of being better for yourself. I want to do things better. And so I think that was an important insight, this idea of desire. And the second idea was that these connections between the functional advantages of technology and how people learned. Now, so I'll tell you the story of one of the informants in this research. Very typical, Tracy. Tracy was, she was a mother, and she had teenage children, and every year she went to the travel agent and booked the holiday, and that was her role. And then when the children were teenagers, they began to go online and say, sure, look, you're wasting your time down there in Falcon Travel, like we can get a good deal. On Trivago or wherever else they were looking. But two things happened. Tracy then, was not computer competent and so therefore couldn't participate in that. And she said, well, actually, that's a bit of I don't like the idea that they're now taking that particular job away from me. And that was her motivation to become, good with computers. But she also understood that booking travel involved decisions, it involved having your credit card, having all the other aspects of it. So she arranged with her neighbour, who I call a proxy, and she said, well, look, I have a neighbour, Marie, I'm going over to Marie, and Marie will do it for me, because, so Marie was, where do you want to stay, etc., and things like that. And she describes, and Marie she's a real friend, real helpful, showing all the decisions and things like that. And she describes herself, and she's sitting just back from Marie and, going through, and I want it here. And then Marie says, do you not want to stay an extra day there and things like that? And she was then, internally going, it's none of her business, And then she said, and anyway, I was looking at her and I was saying, I can do that, And so, off she goes, and she takes the situation. And so this was a journey of, first of all, a shift in power in the house, that she said, actually, that's not going to happen. I do holidays, that's my job. Secondly, a kind of understanding of what the function of the new technology was, the advantages. You could get a cheaper holiday, you could separate the flight from the hotel, you could do all this. Totally understood. Got that, because again, it's just a simple transfer of that practice from what happens in a travel agent to what happens online. The use of a proxy of a person who she didn't want to be the teenagers, sons or daughters, but she wanted it to be her friend. Again, lovely, supportive environment, but absolutely seeing two things. One is, let me control this myself, and secondly, actually, it's not as difficult now that I see how it's done. Mm-hmm. That really matter-of-fact, practical approach to identifying what you want to do and doing it. And then the other one was a man, said bus driver, who began to use email. And he was very specific. I want to be able to write emails. And I remember at the time, the government tried to take a reduction from the old age pension. And what did they call it? The grey revolution or whatever. People went on the streets. And within weeks, he was using emails, and he said to me, did you see my note? I sent a note to Joe Duffy, and Joe Duffy read out his comment on air, you see. So I said, no, he's talking about it. And I was struck by the fact that here was a man who was completely isolated a few months before, shifts in, gets his skill, we'll say, just on email, and then within another 2 weeks is engaged actively in the national debate. Mm-hmm. If you wear the jersey of I'm no good, I was no good at school, I'm still no good, and you're very fixed about that, it's very difficult to unlock it. Whereas if you can actually talk to people and say, well, school was part of your experience, there's been a lot happening to you in between, focus on what people have done, have been successful at, but also, much more importantly, to talk to people about how they can actually grow their skills and grow their brain, literally.